let's see if it's working. Okay, hi everyone. Today I'll be reading more Grimm's fairy tales. Let me check chat if it's working. Okay, I think it's working. Okay, cool. So, I'm going to tweet out that I'm live. Okay, I'm streaming right now. Okay, so let's get started. Let me pull up the book. We'll get to reading. Okay, so we are at the young giant. Okay, so let's read. A long time ago, a countryman had a son who was as big as a thumb and did not become any bigger, and during several years did not grow one hair's breadth. Once, when the father was going out to plow, the little one said, "Father, I will go out with thee." "Thou wouldst go out with me," said the father. "Stay here. Thou wilt be of no use out there. Besides, thou mightst get lost." Then Thumbling began to cry, and for the sake of peace his father put him in his pocket and took him with him. When he was outside the field, he took him out again and set him in a freshly cut furrow. While he was there, a great giant came over the hill. "Dost thou see that great monster?" said the father, for he wanted to frighten the little fellow to make him good. "He is coming to fetch thee." The giant, however, had scarcely taken 2 steps with his long legs before he was in the furrow. He took up little Thumbling carefully before he was in the furrow. He took up little Thumbling carefully with 2 fingers, examined him, and without saying one word, went away with him. His father stood by and could not utter a sound for terror, and he thought nothing else but that his child was lost, and that as long as he lived he should never set eyes on him again. The giant, however, carried him home, suckled him, and Thumbling grew and became tall and strong after the manner of giants. When 2 years had passed, the old giant took him into the forest, wanted to try him, and said, "Pull up a stick for thyself." Then the boy was already so strong that he tore a young tree out of the earth by the roots. But the giant thought, "We must do better than that," took him back again and suckled him 2 years longer. When he tried him, he strengthened and increased so much that he could tear an old tree out of the ground. That was still not enough for the giant. He again suckled him for 2 years, and when he then went with him to the forest and said, "Now just tear up a proper stick for me." The boy tore up the strongest oak tree from the earth, so that it split, and that was a mere trifle to him. "Now that will do," said the giant. "Thou art perfect," and took him back to the field from whence he had brought him. His father was there following the plough. The young giant went up to him and said, "Does my father see what a fine man his son has grown into?" The farmer was alarmed and said, "No, thou art not my son. I don't want thee. Leave me. Truly I am your son. Allow me to do your work. I can plough as well as you, nay better." No, thou art not my son, and thou canst not plough. Go away." After as he was afraid of this great man, he left hold of the plough, stepped back, and stood at one side of the piece of land. Then the youth took the plough and just pressed it with one hand, but his grasp was so strong that the plough went deep into the earth. The farmer could not bear to see that. He called to him, "If thou art determined to plough, thou must not press so hard on it. That makes bad work." The youth, however, harnessed the horses and drew the plough himself, saying, "Just go home, father, and bid my mother make ready a large dish of food, and in the meantime I will go over the field." Then the farmer went home and ordered his wife to prepare the food, but the youth plowed the field, which was 2 acres large, quite alone. And then he harnessed himself to the harrow and harrowed the whole of the land. Using 2 harrows at once, when he had done it, he went into the forest and pulled up 2 oak trees, laid them across his shoulders, and hung 1 harrow on them behind and 1 before, and also 1 horse behind and 1 before, and carried it all as if it had been a bundle of straw to his parents' house. When he entered the yard, his mother did not recognize him and asked, "Who is that horrible tall man?" The farmer said, "That is our son." She said, "No, that cannot be our son. We never had such a tall one. Ours was a little thing." She called to him, "Go away. We do not want thee." The youth was silent, but led his horses to the stable, gave them oats and hay and all that they wanted. When he had done this, he went into the parlor, sat down on the bench, and said, Mother, now I should like something to eat. Will it soon be ready?" Then she said, "Yes," and brought in 2 immense dishes full of food, which would have been enough to satisfy himself and her husband for a week. The youth, however, ate the whole of it himself, and asked if she had nothing more to set before him. "No," she replied, "this is all we have, but that was only a taste. I must have more." She did not dare to oppose him, and went and put a huge cauldron full of food on the fire, and when it was ready, carried it in. At length come a few crumbs, said he, and ate all there was, but it was still not sufficient to appease his hunger. Then he said, "Father, I see well that with thee I shall never have food enough. If thou wilt get me an iron staff, which is strong and which I cannot break against my knees, I will go into the world." The farmer was glad, put 2 horses in his cart, and fetched from the smith a staff so large and thick that the 2 horses could only just bring it away. The youth laid it across the knees and snapped. He broke it in 2 in the middle like a bean-stick, and threw it away. The father then harnessed 4 horses and brought a bar which was so long and thick that the 4 horses could only just drag it. The son snapped this also in twain against his knees, threw it away, and said, "Father, this can be of no use to me. Thou harness more horses, and bring a stronger staff." So the father harnessed 8 horses, and brought one which was so long and thick that the 8 horses could only just carry it. When the son took it in his hand, he broke a bit from the top of it also, and said, "Father, I see that thou wilt not be able to procure me any such staff as I want. I will remain no longer with thee." So he went away and gave out that he was a smith's apprentice. He arrived at a village wherein lived a smith who was a greedy fellow, who never did a kindness to anyone, but wanted everything for himself. The youth went into the smithy to him and asked if he needed a journeyman. "Yes," said the smith, and looked at him and thought, "That is a strong fellow, who will strike out well and earn his bread." So he asked, "How much wages dost thou want?" I don't want any at all," he replied. "Only every fortnight, when the other journeymen are paid, I will give these 2 blows, and thou must bear them." The miser was heartily satisfied, and thought he would thus save much money. Next morning the strange journeyman was to begin to work, but when the master brought the glowing bar, and the youth struck his first blow, the iron flew asunder, and the anvil sank so deep into the earth that there was no bringing bring it out again. Then the miser grew angry and said, "Oh, but I can't make any use of thee. Thou strikest far too powerfully. What wilt thou have for the one blow?" Then he said, "I will only give thee quite a small blow. That's all." Let's see, three and a half more pages of the story left. And he raised his foot and gave him such a kick that he flew away over 4 loads of hay. Then he sought out the thickest iron bar in the smithy for himself, took it as a stick in his hand, and went onwards. When he had walked for some time, he came to a small farm and asked the bailiff if he did not require a head servant. "Yes," said the bailiff, "I can make use of one. You look a strong fellow who can do something. How much a year do you want as wages?" He again replied that he wanted no wages at all, but that every year he would give him 3 blows, which he must bear. Then the bailiff was satisfied, for he too was a covetous fellow. Next morning all the servants were to go into the wood, and the others were already up, but the head servant was still in bed. Then one of them called to him, "Get up, it is time. We are going to the wood, and thou must go with us." "Ah," said he quite roughly and surely, "you may just go then. I shall be back again before any of you." Then the others went to the bailiff and told him that the headman was still lying in bed and would not go into the wood with them. The bailiff said that they were to wake him again and tell him to harness the horses. The headman, however, said as before, "Just go there. I shall be back again before any of you." And then he stayed in bed 2 hours longer. At length he arose from the feathers, but first he got himself 2 bushels of peas from the loft, made himself some broth with them, ate it at his leisure, and when that was done, went to harness the horses and drove into the wood. Not far from the wood was a ravine through which he had to pass, so he had first drove the horses off. Then he stopped them and went behind the cart, took trees and brushwood, and made a great barricade so that no horse could get through. When he was entering the wood, the others were just driving out of it with their loaded carts to go home. Then he said to them, "Drive on, I will still get home before you do." He did not drive far into the wood, but at once tore 2 of the very largest trees of all out of the earth, threw them on his cart, and turned around. When he came to the barricade, the others were still standing there, not able to get through. "Don't you see," said he, "that if you had stayed with me, you would have got home just as quickly and would have had another hour's sleep?" He now wanted to drive on, but his horses could not work their way through. So he unharnessed them and laid them at the top of the cart, took all the shafts in his own hands and drew it over, and he did just as easily as if he had been laden with feathers. When he was over, he said to the others, "There, you see, I have got over quicker than you," and drove on. And the others had to stay where they were. In the yard, however, he took a tree in his hand, showed it to the bailiff, and said, "Isn't that a fine bundle of wood?" Then said to the bailiff to his wife, "The servant is a good one. If he does sleep long, he is still home before the others." So he served the bailiff a year, and when that was over and the other servants were getting their wages, he said it was time for him to have his too. The bailiff, however, was afraid of the blows which he was to receive, and earnestly entreated him to excuse him from having them, for rather than that he himself would be head servant and the youth would be bailiffs. "No," he said, "I will not be a bailiff. I am head servant and will remain so, but I will administer that which we agreed on. The bailiff was willing to give him whatsoever he demanded, but it was of no use. That servant said no to everything. Then the bailiff did not know what to do and begged for a fortnight's delay, for he wanted to find some way to escape. That servant consented to this delay. The bailiff summoned all of his clerks together, and they were to think the matter over and gave him advice. The clerks pondered for a long time, but at last they said that no one was sure of his life with the head servant, or for he could kill a man as easily as a midge, and that the bailiff ought to make him get into the well and clean it. And when he was down below, they would roll up one of the millstones which was lying there and throw it on his head. And then he would never return to daylight. The advice pleased the bailiff, and the head servant was quite willing to go down and well. When he was standing below at the bottom, they rolled down the largest millstone and thought they had broken his skull. But he cried, "Chase away those hens from the well. They are scratching in the sand up there and throwing the grains into my eyes, so that I can't see." So the bailiff cried, "Shh," and pretended to frighten the hens away. When the head servant had finished his work, he climbed up and said, "Just look what a beautiful necktie I have on." And behold, it was the millstone which he was wearing around his neck. The head servant now wanted to take his reward, but the bailiff again begged for a fortnight's delay. The clerks met together and advised him to send the head servant to the haunted mill to grind corn by night, for from thence as yet no man has returned in the morning alive. The proposal pleased the bailiff. He called the head servant that very evening and ordered him to take 8 bushels of corn to the mill and grind it that night, for it was wanted. So the head servant went to the loft and put 2 bushels in his right pocket and 2 his left, and took 4 in a wallet, half on his back and half on his breast, and thus laden went to the haunted mill. The miller told him that he could grind there very well by day, but not by night, for the mill was haunted, and that up the present time whosoever has gone into it at night had been found in the morning, lying dead inside. He said, "I will manage it, just you go away to bed." Then he went to the mill and poured out the corn. About 11 o'clock he went into the miller's room and sat down on the bench. When he had sat there a while, a door suddenly opened, and a large table came in, and on the table wine and roasted meats placed themselves, and much good food besides, but everything came of itself, for no one was there to carry it. After this the chairs pushed themselves up, but no people came, and all at once he beheld fingers which handled knives and forks, and laid food on the plates, but with this exception he saw nothing. As he was hungry and saw the food, he too placed himself at the table, ate with those who were eating, and enjoyed it. When he had enough, and the others also had quite emptied their dishes, he distinctly heard all the candles being suddenly snuffed out, and as it was now pitch dark, he felt something like a box on the ear. Then he said, "If anything of that kind comes again, I shall strike out in return." And when he had received a second box on the ear, he too struck out, and so it continued the whole night. He took nothing without returning it, but repaid everything with interest, and did not lay about him in vain. At daybreak, however, everything ceased. When the miller had got up, he wanted to look after him, and wondered if he were still alive. Then the youth said, "I have eaten my fill, have received some boxes on the ear, but I have given some in return." The miller rejoiced, and said the miller was now released from the spell, and wanted to give him much money as a reward. But he said, "Money I will not have, I have enough of it." So he took his mule on his back and went home, and told the bailiff that he had done what he had been told to do, and would now have the reward agreed on. When the bailiff heard that, he was seriously alarmed and quite beside him. He walked backwards and forwards to his room, and drops of perspiration ran down from his forehead. Then he opened the window to get some fresh air, but before he was aware, the head servant had given him such a kick that he flew through the window out into the air, and so far away that no one ever saw him again. Then said the head servant to the bailiff, "Why?" Then said the head servant to the bailiff's wife, "If he does not come back, thou must take the other blow." She cried, "No, no, I cannot bear it," and opened the other window because drops of perspiration was running down her forehead. Then he gave her such a kick that she too flew out, and as she was lighter, she was much higher than her husband. Her husband cried, "Do come to me," but she replied, "Come thou to me, I cannot come to thee." They hovered about there in the air and could not get to each other. And whether they are hovering about or not, I do not know, but the young giant took up his iron bar and went on to his way. Okay, any chat? No chat, okay. Next story. Sweet porridge. There was a poor but good little girl who lived alone with her mother, and they no longer had anything to eat. So the child went into the forest, and there an aged woman met her who was aware of her sorrow, and presented her with a little pot, which, when she said, "Cook, little pot, cook," would cook good sweet porridge, and when she said, "Stop, little pot," it ceased to cook. The girl took the pot home to her mother, and now they were freed from their poverty and hunger, and ate sweet porridge as often as they chose. Once on a time when the girl had gone out, her mother said, "Cook, little pot, cook," and it did cook, and she ate till she was satisfied. And then she wanted the pot to stop cooking, but did not know the word. So it went on cooking, and the porridge rose over the edge, and still it cooked on until the kitchen and the whole house were full. And then the next house, and then the whole street, just as if it wanted to satisfy the hunger of the whole world. Then there was the greatest distress, but no one knew how to stop it. At last, when only one single house remained, the child came out home and said, "Stop, little pot," and it stopped and gave up cooking, and whoever wished to return to the town had to eat his way back. Okay, lots of porridge. Okay, the Elves. 1. There was once a shoemaker who through no fault of his own, became so poor that at last he had nothing left but just enough leather to make one pair of shoes. He cut out the shoes at night so as to set to work upon them next morning. And as he had a good conscience, he laid himself quietly down in his bed, committed himself to heaven, and fell asleep. In the morning, after he had said his prayers and was going to get to work, he found a pair of shoes made and finished. And standing on his table, he was very much astonished and could not tell what to think. And he took the shoes in his hand to examine them more closely, and they were so well made that every stitch was in its right place, just as if they had come from the hand of a master workman. Soon after, a purchaser entered, and as the shoes fitted him very well, he gave more than the usual price for them, so that the shoemaker had enough money to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes. He cut them out at night and intended to set to work the next morning with fresh spirit, but that was not to be, for when he got up they were already finished, and even a customer was not lacking, who gave him so much money that he was able to buy leather enough for 4 new pairs. Early next morning he found the 4 pairs also finished, and so it always happened. Whatever he cut out in the evening was worked up by the morning, so that he was soon in the way of making a good living, and in the end became very well to do. One night not long before Christmas, when the shoemaker had finished cutting out, before he went to bed, he said to his wife, "How would it be if we were to sit up tonight and see who it is that does us the service?" His wife agreed and set a light to burn. Then they both hid in a corner of the room behind some coats that were hanging up. And then they began to watch. As soon as it was midnight, they saw come in 2 neatly formed naked little men, who seated themselves before the shoemaker's table, and took up the work that was already prepared, and began to stitch, to pierce, and to hammer so cleverly and quickly that the shoemaker's eyes could scarcely follow them. So full of wonder was he, and they never fell off until everything was finished that was standing ready on the table, and they jumped up and ran off. The next morning the shoemaker's wife said to her husband, "Those little men have made us rich, and he ought to show ourselves grateful. With all their running about and having nothing to cover them, they must be very cold. I'll tell you what, I'll make little shirts, coats, waistcoats, and breeches for them, and knit each other of them a pair of stockings, and you shall make them each them a pair of shoes." The husband consented willingly, and at night, when everything was finished, they laid the gifts together on the table, instead of the cut-out work, and placed themselves so they could observe how the little men would behave. When midnight came, they rushed in ready to work, but when they found, instead of the pieces of prepared leather, the neat little garments put ready for them, they stood a moment in surprise, and then they showed the greatest delight. With the greatest swiftness they took up the pretty garments and slipped them on, singing, "What spruce and dandy boys are we, no longer cobblers we will be." Then they hopped and danced about, jumping over the chairs and tables, and at last they danced out the door. From that time they were never seen again, but always went well, and the shoemaker, as long as he lived, and whatever he took, it had prospered. 2. There was once a poor servant maid who was very cleanly and industrious. She swept down the house every day, and put the sweepings on a great heap by the door. One morning before she began her work, she found a letter, and as she could not read, she laid her broom in the corner, and took the letter to the master and mistress to see what it was about, and it was an invitation from the Elves, who wished the maid to come and stand godmother to one of their children. The maid did not know what to do, as she was told that no one ought to refuse the Elves anything. She made up her mind to go. So there came the little Elves, who conducted into the middle of a high mountain, where the little people lived. Here everything was of a very small size, but more fine and elegant than can be told. The mother of the child lay in a bed made of ebony, studded with pearls. The counterpane was embroidered with gold. The cradle was of ivory, and the bathing tub of gold. So the maid stood godmother and was then going home, but the elves begged her to stay at least 3 more days with them, and so she consented and spent the time in mirth and jollity, and the elves seemed very fond of her. At last, when she was ready to go away, they filled her pockets full of gold and led her back again out of the mountain. When she got back to the house, she was going to begin working again, and took her broom in her hand. It was still standing in the corner where she had left it, and began to sweep. Then came up with some strangers and asked her who she was and what she was doing. And she found that instead of 3 days, she had been 7 years with the elves in the mountain, and that during that time that her master and mistress had died. 3. The elves once took a child away from its mother and left its place a changeling with with a big head and staring eyes, who did nothing but eat and drink. The mother, in her trouble, went to her neighbors and asked for their advice. The neighbors told her to take the changeling into the kitchen and put it near the hearth, and then to make up the fire. Then boil water in 2 eggshells. That would make the changeling laugh, and if he laughed, it would be all over with him. So the woman did as the neighbors advised, and when she set the eggshells in the water on the fire, the changeling said, Though old I be, as forest tree, cooking an eggshell never did I see, and began to laugh. And directly there came in a crowd of elves bringing in the right child, and they laid it near the hearth and carried the changeling away with them. Fair Katrineljie and Pif-Paf-Poltrie. Ooh, this might be hard to read. Good day, Father Holland thee. Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie. May I be allowed to have your daughter? Oh yes, and Mother Milcow, Brother High and Mighty Sister Kilsitrot, and fair Katrineljie are willing. You can have her. Where is Mother Milcow then? She is in the cow house milking the cow. Good day, Mother Milcow. Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie. May I be allowed to have your daughter? Oh yes, if Father Hollandy, Brother High and Mighty Sister Kissitrot, and fair Katrineljie are willing, you can have her. Where is Brother High and Mighty then? He is in the room chopping some wood. Good day, Brother High and Mighty. Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie. May I be allowed to have your sister? Oh yes, if Father Hollandy, Mother Milcow, Sister Kilsitrot, and fair Katrineljie are willing, you can have her. Where is Sister Kilsitrot then? She is in the garden cutting cabbages. Good day, Sister Kilsitrot. Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie. May I be allowed to have your sister? Oh yes, if Father Hollandy, Mother Milcow, Brother High and Mighty, and fair Katrineljie are willing, you may have her. Where is fair Katrineljie then? She is in the room counting out her farthings. Good day, fair Katrineljie. Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie. Wilt thou be my bride? Oh yes, if Father Hollandy, Mother Milcow, Brother High and Mighty, and Sister Kilsitrot are willing, I am ready. Fair Katrineljie, how much dowry hast thou? 14 farthings in ready money, 3.5 groschen owing to me half a pound of dried apples, a handful of fried bread, and a handful of spices, and many other things are mine. Pif-Paf-Poltrie, what is thy trade? Art thou a tailor? Something better. A shoemaker? Something better. A husbandman? Something better. A joiner? Something better. A smith? Something better. A miller? Something better. Perhaps a brewmaker? Yes, that is what I am. Yes, that's what I am. Is it not a fine trade? The old beggar-woman. There was once an old woman, but thou hast surely seen an old woman go a-begging before now. The woman begged likewise, and when she got anything she said, May God reward you. The beggar-woman came to a door, and there by the fire a friendly rogue of a boy standing warming himself. The boy said kindly to the poor old woman, and she was standing shivering thus by the door, Come, old mother, and warm yourself. She came in, but stood too near the fire, so that her old rags began to burn, and she was not aware of it. The boy stood and saw that, but he ought to have put the flames out. And if he could not find any water, then should he have swept all the water in his body out of his eyes, and that would have supplied 2 fine streams with which to extinguish them. The Jew among thorns. There was once a rich man who had a servant who served him diligently and honestly. Every morning the servant was the first out of bed and the last to go, the rest at night, and whenever there was a difficult job to be done, which nobody cared to undertake, he was always the first to set himself to it. Moreover, he never complained, but was contented with everything and always merry. When a year was ended, his master gave him no wages, for he said to himself, That is the cleverest way, for I shall have something, and he will not go away, but stay quietly in my service. The servant said nothing, but did not work the second year as he had done it the first. And when at the end of this, likewise, he received no wages, he made himself happy and still stayed on. When the 3rd year also was past, the master considered, put his hand in his pocket, and pulled nothing out. Then at last the servant said, Mother, for 3 years I have served you honestly. Be so good to give me what I ought to have, for I wish to leave and look about me a little more in the world. Yes, my good fellow, answered the old miser, you have served me industriously, and therefore you shall be cheerfully rewarded. And he put his hand into his pocket and counted only 3 farthings, saying, There, you have a farthing for each year, and that is large and liberal pay, such as you would have received from few masters. The honest servant, who understood little about money, put his fortune into his pocket and thought, now that I have my purse full, why need I trouble and plague myself any longer with hard work? So on he went up the hill and down dale, and sang and jumped to his heart's content. Now it came to pass that he was going by a thicket. A little man stepped out and called to him, Whither away, merry brother? I see you do not carry many cares. Why should I be sad? Answered the servant. I have enough. 3 years' wages are jingling in my pocket. How much is your treasure? The dwarf asked him. How much? 3 farthings sterling, all told. Look here, said the dwarf. I am a poor needy man. Give me your 3 farthings. I can work no longer, but you are young and can easily earn your bread. Then the little man said, As I see you have a good heart, I grant you 3 wishes. For each farthing they shall be all fulfilled. Aha, said the servant, you are one of those who can work wonders. Well then, if it is to be so, I wish first for a gun. which shall hit everything that I aim at. Secondly, for a fiddle, which when I play on it shall compel all who hear it to dance. Thirdly, that if I ask a favor of any one, he shall not be able to refuse it. All that you have, said the dwarf, and put his head onto the bush, and only think there lay a fiddle and gun already, just as if they had been ordered. Then he gave to the servant, and then said to him, whatever you may ask at any time, no man in the world should be able to deny you. Heart alive, what more can one desire? Said the servant to himself, then went merrily onwards. Soon afterwards they met a Jew with a long goat's beard, who was standing listening to the song of a bird, which was sitting up at the top of the tree. Good heavens, he was exclaiming, that such a small creature should have such a fearfully loud voice. If it were but mine, if only someone would sprinkle some salt upon its tail. If that is all, said the servant, the bird shall soon be down here. And taking aim, he pulled the trigger, and down fell the bird into the thorn bushes. Go, you rogue, he said to the Jew, and fetch the bird out for yourself. Oh, said the Jew, leave out the rogue, my master, and I will do it at once. I will get the bird out for myself, as you really have it, as you really hit it. I'll have hit it. Then he lay down on the ground and began to crawl into the thicket. When he was fast among the thorns, the good servant's humor so tempted him that he took up his fiddle and began to play. In a moment the Jew's legs began to move and to jump into the air, and the more the servant fiddled, the better went the dance. But the thorns tore his shabby coat from him, combed his beard, and pricked and plucked him all day over the body. Oh dear, cried the Jew, what do I want with your fiddling? Leave the fiddle alone, master. I do not want to dance. But the servant did not listen to him, and thought, you have pleased people often enough now that the thorn bushes shall do the same to you. And he began to play over again, so that the Jew had to jump higher than ever and scrape his coat were left hanging on the shoe. Oh, woes be, cried the Jew. I will give the gentleman whatsoever he asks, if only he leaves off fiddling. A purse full of gold. If you are so liberal, said the servant, I will stop my music. But this I must say to your credit, that you dance to it so well that it is quite an art. And having taken the purse, he went his way. The Jew stood still and watched the servant quietly until he was far off and out of sight, and then he screamed out with all his might, you miserable musician, you beer-house fiddler, wait till I catch you alone. I will hunt you till the soles of your shoes fall off. You ragamuffin, just put 5 farthings in your mouth, and then you may be worth 3 half-pieces, and went on abusing him as fast as he could speak. As soon as he had refreshed himself a little in this way, he got his breath again. He ran into the town to the justice. My lord judge, he said, I have come to make a complaint. See how a rascal has robbed and ill-treated me on the public highway. A stone on the ground might pity me, but clothes all torn. My clothes all torn, my body pricked and scratched. My little all gone, with my purse good ducats each piece, better than the last. For God's sake, let the man be thrown into prison. Was it a soldier, said the judge, who cut you thus with his saber? Nothing of the sort, said the Jew. It was no sword that he had, but a gun hanging at his back, and a fiddle at his neck. the wretch may easily be known. So the judge sent his people out after the man, and they found the good servant, who had been going quite slowly along, and they found too the purse with the money upon him. As soon as he was taken before the judge, he said, "I did not touch the Jew nor take his money. He gave it to me of his own free will, that I might leave off fiddling because he could not bear my music." "Heaven defend us!" cried the Jew. His lies are as thick as flies upon the wall. But the judge also did not believe his tale, and said, "This is a bad defense. No Jew would do that. No Jew would do that." And because he had committed robbery on the public highway, he sentenced the good servant to be hanged. As he was being led away, the Jew again screamed after him, "You vagabond, you dog of a fiddler, now you are going to receive your well-earned reward." The servant walked quietly with the hangman up the ladder, but upon the last step he turned around and said to the judge, "Grant me just one request before I die." "Yes, if you do not ask for life," said the judge. "I do not ask for life," answered the servant, "but as a last favor, let me play once more upon my fiddle." The Jew raised a great cry of "Murder, murder, for goodness' sake! Do not allow it, do not allow it." But the judge said, "Why should I not let him have his short pleasure? It has been granted to him, and he shall have it." However, he could not have refused on account of the gift which had been bestowed on the servant. And then the Jew cried, "Oh, woe's me! Tie me fast." While the good servant took his fiddle from his neck and made ready. As he gave the first scrape, they all began to quiver and shake. The judge, his clerk, and the hangman and his men, and the cord fell out of the hand, and the one who was going to tie the Jew fast, at the second scrape, all raised legs, and the hangman let go his hold of the good servant and made himself ready to dance. At the third scrape they all leaped up and began to dance. The judge and the Jew being the best at jumping. Soon all who was gathered in the marketplace, out of curiosity, were dancing with them, old and young, fat and lean, one and another. The dogs likewise, which had run there, got up on their hind legs and capered about, and the longer he played, the higher sprang the dancers, so they knocked against each other's heads and began to shriek terribly. At length the judge cried out of breath, "I will give you your life if you will only stop fiddling." The good servant thereupon had compassion, took the fiddle and hung it round his neck again, and stepped down the ladder. Then he went up to the Jew, who was lying upon the ground panting his breath, and said, "Yes, rascal, now confess whence you got the money, or I will take any fiddle and begin to play again." I stole," he cried, "but you have honestly earned it." So the judge had the Jew taken to the gallows and hanged as a thief. King Thrushbeard. A king had a daughter who was beautiful beyond... Hi. Oh, that's me. Obey. The part of the text you're reading is off screen, by the way. Oh, sorry. Hand rubbing intensifies. Oh, okay. Is this still off screen? I can make the thing wider. Okay. King Thrushbeard. A king had a daughter who was beautiful beyond measure, but so proud and overbearing that none of her suitors were good enough for her. She did not refuse. She not only refused one after the other, but made a laughing stock out of them. Once the king appointed a great feast. He had bade all the marriageable men to it from far and near, and they were all put in rows according to their rank and station. First came the king's rows according to their rank and station. They were all put in rows according to their rank and station. But first came the kings, then the princes, the dukes, the earls, the barons, and lastly the noblemen. The princess was led in front of the rows, but she had a mocking epithet for each. One was too fat, what a tub, and she another too tall. Long and lean is ill to be seen, and she a third too short. Fat and short, not fit to court, said she. A fourth was too pale, a regular death's head. A fifth too red-faced, a game cock, she called him. The sixth was not well made enough, green wood ill-dried, cried she. So everyone had something against him, and she was especially merry over a good king who was very tall, and whose chin had grown a little peaked. Only look, cried she, laughing. He has a chin like a thrush's beak. And from that time they called him King Thrushbeard. But the old king, when he saw that his daughter mocked everyone and scorned all the assembled suitors, swore in his anger that she should have the first beggar that came to the door for a husband. A few days afterwards came a traveling ballad singer, and sang under the window in hopes of a small alms. When the king heard of it, he said that he must come in, and so the ballad singer entered in his dirty tattered garments and sang before the king and his daughter. When he had done, he asked for a small reward, but the king said, "Your song has so well pleased me that I will give you my daughter to wife." The princess was horrified, but the king said, "I took an oath to give you the first beggar that came, and so it must be done." There was no remedy. The priest was fetched, and she had to be married to the ballad singer, out of hand. When all was done, the king said, "Now, as you are a beggar wife, you can stay no longer in my castle, so off with you and your husband." The beggar man led her away, and she was obliged to go forth with him on foot. On the way came to a great wood, and she asked, "Oh, whose is this forest so thick and fine?" He answered, "It is King Thrushbeard's, and might have been thine." And she cried, "Oh, I was a silly young thing. I'm afeard would I had taken that good King Thrushbeard." Then he passed through a meadow, and she said, "Oh, who is this meadow so green and so fine?" He answered, "It is King Thrushbeard's, and might have been thine." Then she cried, "Oh, I was a silly young thing. I feared would I have taken that good King Thrushbeard." And they passed through a meadow, and she asked, "Oh, whose is this meadow so green and so fine?" Well, excuse me. "Whose is this meadow so green and so fine?" He answered, "It is King Thrushbeard's, and I might have been thine." And she cried, "I was a silly young thing. I feared would I had taken that good King Thrushbeard." Then they passed through a great town, and she asked, Who is this city so great and fine?" He answered, "Oh, it's King Thrushbeard's, and might have been thine." And she cried, "I was a silly young thing. I'm afeard would I had taken that good King Thrushbeard." Then the beggar man, "It does not please me to hear you always wishing for another husband, and I'm not good enough for you." And am I not good enough for you? At last they came to a very small house, and she said, "Oh dear me, what poor little house do I see, and whose I would know baby wretched hole be?" The man answered, "That is my house and yours, where we must live together." She had to stoop before she could go in the door. "Where are your servants?" asked the king's daughter. "What servants?" answered the beggar-man. What do you want to have done? What you want to have done, you must do yourself. Make a fire quickly and put on water and cook me some food. I am very tired." The king's daughter understood nothing about fire making and cooking, and the beggar-man had to lend a hand himself in order to manage it all. And when they had eaten their poor fare, they went to bed, but the man called up his wife very early in the morning and in order to clean the house. For a few days they lived in this indifferent manner until they came to the end of the store. "Wife," said the man, "this will not do, stopping here and earning nothing. You must make baskets." So he went out and cut willows and brought them home, and she began to weave them. But the hard twigs wounded her tender hands. "I see this will not do," said the man. You had better try spinning." So she sat her down and tried to spin, but the harsh thread cut her soft fingers so that the blood flowed. "Look now," said the man, "you are no good at any sort of work. I made a bad bargain when I took you. I must see what I can do to make a trade of pots and earthen vessels. You can sit in the market and offer them for sale." "Oh dear," thought she, "suppose while I am selling in the market, people belonging to my father's kingdom should see me. How they would mock me!" But there was no help for it. She had to submit or else die of hunger. First day all went well. The people brought her wares eagerly, because she was so beautiful, and gave her whatever she asked, and some of them gave her money and left her pots after all behind them, and they lived on these earnings as long as they lasted, and the man brought a number of new pots. So she seated herself in a corner of the market and stood the wares before her for sale. At all once a drunken horse soldier came plunging by, and rode straight into the midst of her pots, breaking them into 1,000 pieces. She could do nothing for weeping. "Oh dear, what will become of me?" cried she. "What will my husband say?" And she hastened home and told him her misfortune. "Whoever heard of such a thing as sitting in the corner of the market with earthenware pots?" said the man. "Now leave off crying. I see you're not fit for any regular work. I have been asking at your father's castle if they want a kitchen maid, and they said they don't mind taking you. At any rate, you will get your victuals free." And the king's daughter became a kitchen maid, to be at the cook's beck and call and do the hardest work. In each of her pockets she fastened a little pot, and brought home in them what was ever left, and upon that she and her husband were fed. It happened one day, when the wedding of the eldest prince was celebrated, the poor woman went upstairs and stood up at the parlor door to see what was going on. And when the place was lighted up and the company arrived, and each person handsomer than the one before, in all brilliancy and splendor, she thought of her own fate with a sad heart, and bewailed her former pride and haughtiness, which had brought her so low, and plunged her into great poverty. And as the rich and delicate dishes, smelling so good, were carried to and fro every now and then, the servants would throw her a few fragments, which she put in her pockets, intending to take home. And then the prince himself passed in, clothed in silk and velvet, with a gold chain around his neck. And when she saw the beautiful woman standing in the doorway, she seized her hand and urged her to dance with him. But she refused, all trembling, for she saw it was King Thrushbeard, who had come to court her, whom she had turned away with mocking. It was of no use for her resisting, he drew her into the room, and all at once the band to which her pockets were fastened broke, and the pots fell out, and the soup ran about, and the fragments were scattered all around. And when the people saw that, there was great laughter and mocking, and she felt so ashamed that she wished herself 1,000 fathoms underground. She rushed to the door to fly from the place, wherein a man caught her on the steps, and when she looked at him, it was King Thrushbeard again. He said to her in a kind tone, "Do not be afraid. I said the beggar man, and I and the beggar man whom you lived with in the wretched little hut are one. For love of you, I disguised myself, and it was I who broke your pots in the guise of a horse soldier. I did all that to bring down your proud heart, and to punish your haughtiness, which caused you to mock me." Then she wept bitterly and said, "I have done great wrong, and I am not worthy to be your wife." But he said, "Take courage, the evil days are gone now, and let us keep our wedding day." Then came the ladies in waiting and put on resplendent clothing, and her father came, the whole court, and wished her joy on her marriage with King Thrushbeard. And then the merry-making began in good earnest. "I cannot help wishing you and I could have been there too." Okay, new chat. No new chat. Okay, let me... Oh, whoops. Kind of want to move this a little bit this way. Okay. Clever Gretel. There was once a cook called Gretel who wore shoes with red heels, and when she went out in them she gave herself great airs, and thought herself very fine indeed. When she came home again she would take a drink of wine to refresh herself, and as they gave her an appetite she would take some of the best whatever she was cooking, until she had enough, for said she, "A cook must know how things taste." It happened that one day her master came to her and said, "Gretel, I expect a guest this evening. You must make ready a pair of fowls." I will see to it," answered Gretel. So she killed the fowls, cleaned them, and plucked them, and put them on the spit. And then, as evening drew near, placed them before the fire to roast. And they began to be brown and were nearly done, but the guest had not come. If he does not make haste," cried Gretel to her master, "I must take them away from the fire. It's a pity and a shame not to eat them now, just when they are done to a turn." And the master said he would run himself and fetch the guest. As soon as he had turned his back, Gretel took the fowls from before the fire. "Standing too long before the fire," she said, makes one hot and thirsty, and so who knows when they will come. In the meanwhile I will go to the cellar and have a drink." So down she ran, took up a mug, and said, "Here's to me," and took a draught. "One good drink deserves another," she said, "and it should not be cut short." So she took another hearty draught. Then she went and put the fowls again to fire, and said, and basting them with butter. She turned the spit briskly around. Now they began to smell so good that Gretel, saying, "I must find out whether they really are all right," licked her fingers and then cried, "Well, I never! The fowls are good. It is a sin and a shame that no one is here to eat them." So she ran to the window to see if her master and his guests were coming. But as she could see nobody, she went back to her fowls. "Why, one of the wings is burning," she cried presently. "I had better eat it and get it out of the way." She cut it off and ate it up, and it tasted good, and she thought, I'd better cut off the other two, just in case the master should miss anything. And when both wings had been disposed of, she went and looked for the master, but still he did not come. Who knows, said she, whether they are coming or not? They may have put up at an inn. And after a pause she said again, Come, I may as well make myself happy, and first I will make sure of a good drink, and then of a good meal, and when all is done I shall be easy. The gifts of the gods are not to be despised. So first she ran down into the cellar and had a famous drink, and ate up one of the fowls with great relish. And when that was done, and still the master did not come, Gretel eyed the other fowl, saying, What one is the other must be. The two belong to each other. It is only fair that they should be both treated alike. Perhaps when I have had another drink I shall be able to manage it. So she took another hearty drink, and then the second fowl went the way of the first. Just as she was in the middle of it, the master came back. Make haste, Gretel, she cried. The guest is coming already. Very well, master, she answered. It will soon be ready. The master went to see that the table was properly laid, and taking the great carving knife with which he meant to carve the fowls, he sharpened it upon the step. Presently came the guest, knocking very gently and softly at the front door. Gretel ran and looked to see who it was, and when she caught sight of the guest, she put her finger on her lip, saying, Hush, make the best haste you can out of this, for if my master catches you, it will be bad for you. He asked you to come to supper, but he really means to cut off your ears. Just listen now, he is sharpening his knife. The guest, hearing the noise of sharpening, made off as fast as he could go. And Gretel had screamed to her master, A pretty guest you have asked to the house, cried she. How so, Gretel? What do you mean? He asked. What indeed, said he. Why he has gone to run away with my pair of fowls, so that I just dished up. That's pretty sort of conduct, said the master, feeling very sorry about the fowls. He might at least have left me for one, that I might have had something to eat. And he called out to him to stop, but the guest made as if he had not heard him. Then he ran after him, his knife still in his hand, crying out, only one, meaning that the guest should have let him out of the fowls and not take both. But the guest thought he meant to have one of his ears, and he ran so much the faster that he might get home with both of them safe. Fitcher's bird. There was once a wizard who used to take the form of a poor man. He went to houses and begged and caught pretty girls. No one knew whither he carried them, for they were never seen more. One day he appeared before the door of a man who had 3 pretty daughters. He looked like a poor weak beggar, and carried a basket on his back, as if he meant to collect charitable gifts in it. He begged for a little food, and when the eldest daughter came out and was just reaching him for a piece of bread, he did not touch her, and she was forced to jump into his basket. Thereupon he buried away with long strides. He carried her away into a dark forest to his house, which stood in the midst of it. Everything in the house was magnificent. He gave her whatsoever she could possibly desire, and said, My darling, thou wilt certainly be happy with me, for thou hast everything my heart can wish for. This lasted a few days, and then he said, I must journey forth and leave thee alone for a short time. Are the keys there are the keys of the house. Thou mayst go everywhere and look at everything except from one room, which this little key here opens, and there I forbid thee to go on pain of death. He likewise gave her an egg and said, Preserve the egg carefully for me, and carry it continually about with thee, for great misfortune would arise from the loss of it. She took the keys and egg and promised to obey him in everything. When he was gone, she went all around the house from the bottom to the top and examined everything. The rooms shone with silver and gold, and thought she had never seen such great splendor. At length she came to the forbidden door. She wished to pass it by, but curiosity let her have no rest. She examined the key and looked just like any other. She put in the keyhole and turned it a little, and the door sprang open. But what did she see when she went in? A great bloody basin stood in the middle of the room, and therein lay human beings, dead and hewn to pieces. Ew. And hard by was a block of wood, and a gleaming axe lay upon it. She was so terrible, alarming, that the egg, which she held in her hand, fell into the basin. She got it out and washed the blood off, but in vain. It appeared again in a moment. She washed and scrubbed, but she could not get it out. It was not long before the man came back from his journey, and the things which he asked for were the key and the egg. She gave them to him, but she trembled as she did so, and he saw at once by the red spots that she had been in the bloody chamber. Since thou hast gone into the room against my will, said he, thou shalt go back into it against thine own. Thy life is ended. He threw her down, dragged her thither by the hair, oh no, and cut her head off on the block, and hewed her in pieces so that her blood ran on the ground. Then he threw herself into the basin with the rest. Now I will fetch myself the second, said the wizard, and again he went to the house in the shape of a poor man and begged. Then the second daughter brought him a piece of bread. He caught her like that by simply touching her and carried her away. She did not fare better than the other sister. She allowed herself to be led away by her curiosity, opened the door of the bloody chamber, looked in, and had to atone for it with her life on the wizard's return. Then he went and brought the third sister, but she was clever and crafty. When he had given her the key and egg and had left her, she first put the egg away with great care, and then she examined the house, and at last went into the forbidden room. At last what she did was what did she behold? Both her sisters lay there in basin, cruelly murdered and cut in pieces. She began to gather their limbs together, put them in order, head, body, arms, and legs, and when nothing further was lacking, the limbs began to move and unite themselves together. And both the maidens opened their eyes and were once more alive. Then they rejoiced and kissed and caressed each other. On his arrival, the man once demanded the keys and the egg. And as he could perceive no trace of blood on it, he said, thou hast stood the test, and thou shalt be my bride. And now had no longer any power over her, and she was forced to do whatsoever she desired. Oh, very well, she said. Thou shalt first take a basketful of gold to my father and mother, and carry it thyself on thy back. In the meantime, I will prepare for the wedding. Then she ran to her sisters, whom she had hidden in a little chamber, and said, "The moment has come when I can save you. The wretch shall himself carry you home again. Then as soon as you are at home, send help to me." She put both of them in a basket and covered them quite over with gold, so that nothing of them was to be seen. Then she called in the wizard and said to him, "Now carry the basket away, but I shall look through a little window and watch to see if thou stopped on the way to stand or to rest." The wizard raised the basket on his back and went away with it, but it weighed him down so heavily that the perspiration streamed from his face. Then he sat down and wanted to rest a while, but immediately one of the girls in the basket cried, "I am looking through my little window, and I see that thou art resting. Wilt thou go out at once? Go on at once?" He thought his bride was calling to him, and got up on his legs again. Once more he was going to sit down, but instantly she cried, "I am looking through my little window, and I see that thou art resting. Wilt thou go on directly?" Whenever he stood still, she cried, and then she was forced to go onwards, until at last, groaning and out of breath, he took the basket with the gold and the two maidens into their parents' house. At home, however, the bride prepared the marriage feast, and sent invitations to the friends of the wizard. Then she took a skull with grinning teeth, put some ornaments on it, and wreath of flowers, carried it upstairs to the garret window, and let it took off from thence. When all was ready, she got into a barrel of honey, and then cut the feather bed open and rolled himself into it until she looked like a wondrous bird, and no one could recognize her. Then she went out of the house, and on her way she met some of the wedding guests, who asked, "O Fitcher's bird, how comest thou here?" "I come from Fitcher's house quite near." And what may the young bride be doing? From cellar to garret she swept all clean, and now from the window she's peeping, I ween. At last she met the bridegroom, who was coming slowly back. He, like the others, asked, "O Fitcher's bird, how comest thou here?" "I come from Fitcher's house quite near." And what may the young bride be doing? From cellar to garret she swept all clean, and now from the window she's peeping, I ween. The bridegroom looked up, I saw the decked out skull, thought it was the bride, thought it was his bride, and nodded to her, greeting her kindly. But when he and his guests had all gone into the house, the brothers and kinsmen of the bride, who had been set to rescue her, arrived. They locked all the doors of the house so that no one might escape, set fire to it, and the wizard and all his crew were burned. Oh, scary stuff. The Robber Bridegroom. There was once a miller who had a beautiful daughter, and when she was grown up, he became anxious that she should be well married and taken care of. So he thought, if a decent sort of man comes and asks her in marriage, I will give her to him. Soon after, a suitor came forward who seemed very well to do, and as the miller knew nothing to his disadvantage, he promised him his daughter. But the girl did not seem to love him as a bride should love her bridegroom. But the girl did not seem to love him as a bride should love her bridegroom, and she had no confidence in him. And often, as she saw As often as she saw him or thought about him, she felt a chill in her heart. One day he said to her, you are, you are to be my bride, and yet you have never been to see me." The girl answered, "I do not know where your house is." Then he said, "The house is a long way in the wood." She began to make excuses and said she could not find the way to it. But the bridegroom said, "You must come and pay me a visit next Sunday. I have already invited company, and I will strew ashes on the path through the wood so that you will be sure to find it." When Sunday came and the girl set out on her way, she felt very uneasy without knowing exactly why, and she filled both pockets full of peas and lentils. There were ashes strewn on the path through the wood, but nevertheless at each step she cast to the right and left a few peas on the ground. So she went on the whole day, until she came to the middle of the wood where it was the darkest. And there stood a lonely house, not pleasant in her eyes, for it was dismal and unhomelike. She walked in, but there was no one there. In the great stillness reigned. Suddenly she heard a voice cry, turn back, thou pretty bride! Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide." The girl glanced around and perceived that the voice came from a bird who was hanging in a cage by the wall. And again it cried, turn back, thou pretty bride! Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide." Then the pretty bride went on from one room into another through the whole house, but it was quite empty and no soul to be found in it. And at last she reached the cellar, and there sat a very old woman nodding her head. "Can you tell me," said the bride, "if my bridegroom lives here?" "Oh, poor child," answered the old woman, "do you know what has happened to you? You're in a place of cutthroats. You thought you were a bride, and soon to be married, but death will be your spouse. Look here, I have a great kettle of water to sit on, and when once they have you in their power, they will cut you in pieces without mercy, cook you and eat you, for they are cannibals. Unless I have pity on you and save you, all is over with you." Then the old woman hid her behind a great cask, where she could not be seen. "Be as still as a mouse," she said. "Do not move or go away, or else you are lost. At night, when the robbers are asleep, we will escape. I have been waiting a long time for an opportunity." No sooner was it settled than the wicked gang entered the house. They brought another young woman with them, dragging her along, and they were drunk and would not listen to her cries and groans. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, out of white wine, one of red and one of yellow, and they cut her in pieces. The poor bride, all the while shaking and trembling when she saw what a fate the robbers had intended for her. One of them noticed on the little finger of the victim a golden ring, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took an axe and chopped it off, but the finger jumped away and fell behind the cask of the bride's lap. The robber took up a light to look for it, but could not find it. Then said one of the others, "Have you looked behind the great cask?" But the old woman cried, "Come to supper and leave off looking till tomorrow. The finger cannot run away." Then the robbers said the old woman was right, and they left off searching and sat down to eat, and the old woman dropped some sleeping stuff into her wine, so that before long they stretched themselves on the cellar floor, sleeping and snoring. When the bride heard that, she came from behind the cask, and had to make her way among the sleepers lying all about on the ground. and she felt very much afraid last night awaken any of them, but by good luck she passed through, and the old woman with her, and they opened the door, and they made haste to leave the house of murderers. The wind had carried away the ashes from the path, but the peas and lentils had budded and sprung up, and the moonshine upon them showed the way. And they went on through the night till the morning they reached the mill. Then the girl related to her father all that happened to her. When the wedding day came, the friends and neighbors assembled. The miller, having invited them, and the bridegroom also appeared. When they were all seated at the table, each one had to tell a story. But the bride sat still and said nothing till at last the bridegroom said to her, "Now, sweetheart, you know no story. Tell us something." She answered, "I will tell you my dream. I was alone through the wood, and I came at last to a house in which there was no living soul. But by the wall was a bird in a cage who cried, 'Turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide.' For here do evil things betide." And then again it said it, "Sweetheart, the dreams is not ended." And then I went through all the rooms, and they were all empty, and it was so lonely and wretched. At last I went into the cellar. Then there sat an old woman nodding her head. I asked her if my bridegroom lived in that house. She answered, "Ah, poor child, you have come into a place of cutthroats. Your bridegroom does live here, but he will kill you and cut you into pieces, and then cook and eat you. Sweetheart, the dream is not ended." But the old woman hid me behind the great cask, and no sooner had she done so than the robbers came home, dragging with them a young woman, and she gave her to drink wine thrice, white, red, and yellow. "Sweetheart, the dream is not yet ended," and they killed her and cut her into pieces. "Sweetheart, my dream is not yet ended." And one of the robbers saw a gold ring on the finger and the young woman, and and as it was difficult to get off, he took an axe and chopped off the finger, which jumped upwards, and then fell behind the great cask on my lap. "And here is the finger with the ring." As these words drew it forth, he showed it. At these words, she drew it forth and showed it to the company. The robber, who took the story, had grown deadly white, sprang up and would have escaped, but the folks held him fast and delivered him up to justice. And he and his whole gang were the evil deeds condemned and executed. Okay, I think this will be my last story. Old Hilderbrand. Once upon a time lived a peasant and his wife, and the person of the village had a fancy for the wife, and had wished for a long while to spend a whole day happily with her, and the peasant woman too was quite willing. One day, therefore, he said to the woman, "Listen, my dear friend, I have now thought of a way by which you can for once spend a whole day happily together. I'll tell you what. On Wednesday you must take your bed and tell your husband you are ill, and if you only complain and act being ill properly, and go on doing it until Sunday, when I have to preach, I will then stay in my sermon that whoever has at home a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or whoever else it may be, and makes a pilgrimage to the Gockerly Hill in Italy, where you can pick a peck of laurel leaves for a cruiser, the sick child, the sick husband, the sick wife, the sick father, or sick mother, or sick sister, or whoever else it may be, will be restored to health immediately. I will manage it, said the woman directly. Now therefore, on the Wednesday, the peasant woman took to her bed, and complained and lamented as agreed on, and her husband did everything for her that he could think of, but nothing did her any good. When Sunday came, the woman said, I feel as ill as I were going to die at once. But there is one thing I should like to do before my end. I should like to hear the person's sermon that he is going to preach today. On that the peasant said, Ah, my child, do not do it. You might make yourself worse if you were to get up. Look, I will go to the sermon and will attend to it very carefully, and will tell you everything the parson says. Well, said the woman, go then, and pay great attention, and repeat to me all that you hear. So the peasant went to the sermon, and the parson began to preach and said, if anyone had at home a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or anyone else, and would make a pilgrimage to the Gockerly Hill in Italy, where a peck of laurel leaves cost a cruiser, the sick child, sick husband, sick wife, sick father, sick mother, sick sister, brother, wherever else it might be, would be restored to health instantly, and whoever wished to undertake the journey was to go to him after the service was over, and he would give him the sack for the laurel leaves and the cruiser. No one was more rejoiced than the peasant, and after the service was over, he went at once to the parson, who gave him the bag for the laurel leaves and the cruiser, and after that he went home, and even went to the house door. He cried, Hurrah, my dear wife is now almost the same thing as if you were well. The parson has preached today that whosoever had a home, a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or whoever it might be, and would make a pilgrimage to the Gockerly Hill in Italy, where a peck of laurel leaves cost a cruiser, the sick child, sick husband, sick wife, sick father, sick mother, sick sister, brother, or whosoever else it was. I lost my place. Whosoever it might be, and would make a pilgrimage to Gockerly Hill in Italy, where a pack of laurel leaves caused the cruiser, the sick child, sick husband, sick wife, sick father, sick mother, sick sister, brother, or whosoever else it was, would be cured immediately, and now have already got the bag and the cruiser from the parson. And will at once begin to my journey, so that you may get well the faster. And thereupon he went away, and he was however hardly gone before the woman got up, and the parson was there directly. But now we will have these two for a while. And followed the peasant, who walked on quickly without stopping, in order to get sooner to the Gockerly Hill. And on his way he met his gossip. His gossip was an egg merchant, and who was coming from the market, where he and sold his eggs. May you be blessed, said the gossip. Where are you off to so fast? To eternity, my friend, said the pastor. My wife is ill. My wife is ill, and I have been today to hear the person's sermon, and be preached that if anyone had his house a sick child, a sick husband, a sick wife, a sick father, a sick mother, a sick sister, brother, or anyone else, and made a pilgrimage to the Gockerly Hill in Italy, where a peck of laurel leaves caused the cruiser, the sick child, the sick husband, the sick wife, the sick sister, the sick mother, the sick sister, the sick husband, the sick wife, the sick father, the sick mother, the sick sister, brother, or whosoever it was, whosoever else it was, would be cured immediately, and so I have got the bag for the laurel leaves and the cruiser from the person. And now I am beginning my pilgrimage. But listen, gossip, and the egg merchant to the peasant, aren't you then stupid enough to believe that a thing as that? Don't you know what it means? The person wants to spend a whole day alone with your wife in peace, so he has given you this job to do and get you out of the way. My word, said the peasant. How I'd like to know if that's true. Come then, said the gossip. I'll tell you what to do. Get into my egg basket and I will carry you home, and then you will see for yourself. So that was settled, and the gossip put the peasant into his egg basket and carried him home. When they got to the house, hurrah! But all was going merrily there. The women had nearly everything killed that was in the farmyard and made pancakes, and the parson was there and had brought his fiddle with him. The gossip knocked at the door, and the woman asked who was there. It is I, the gossip, said the egg merchant. Give me the shelter this night. I've not sold my eggs at the market, so now I'll have to carry them home again, and they are so heavy that I shall never be able to do it. For it is dark already. Indeed, my friend, said the woman. You come at a very convenient time for me, but as you are here, it can't be helped. Come in, and take a seat there on the bench by the stove. Then she placed the gossip on the basket which he carried on his back on the bench by the stove. The parson, however, and the women were as merry as possible. At length the parson said, "Listen, my dear friend, you can sing beautifully. Sing something to me." "Oh," said the woman, "I cannot sing now. In my young days, indeed, I could sing well, but that's all over now." "Come," said the parson once more, "do sing some little song." Then the women sang, "I sent my husband away from me to the Gockerly Hill in Italy." Thereupon the parson sang, "I wish 'twas a year before he came back. I never asked him for the laurel leaf sack. Hallelujah." Then the gossip, who was in the background, began to sing, but I ought to tell you the peasant was called Hilderbrand. So the gossip sang, "What art thou, my Hilderbrand dear, there on the bench by the stove so near? Hallelujah." Then the peasant sang from the basket, "All singing I ever shall hate from this day, and here in the basket no longer I'll stay." And he got out of the basket and drove the parson out of the house. Okay, so that was my last story. I will check the chat. Alright, so that was my last story. Maybe I'll read more fairy tales next weekend. I hope you enjoyed the stream and the stories. I'll upload this on YouTube and put thanks for the stream. You're welcome, Pokemon Rizuna. So I'll put the what is it called again? The timestamps. I'll put the timestamps for this video on YouTube when I upload it in the description and comments. And I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye. Oh wait, I need to read someone. Okay, let me do that real fast. Okay, let's raid Fecko. cafe that go. Okay, bye guys.